everybody. How y'all doing? I'm Julian, CEO of Unifi. I'm here to spend a little more time and talk about some more interesting topics here in the crypto space. Specifically, we're going to be meeting with Humpty Calderon today from Ontology as head of community. We are going to be spending a little bit of time talking about, just kind of the things that are most important, most relevant to us today. Maybe some stuff about EVMs, DAOs, decentralized identity if you have time, and that's about it. So welcome, Humpty.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me.
Hey man, how you doing?
Pretty good. Drinking a little tea, feeling good.
Cool. Yes, I don't know. I think probably a good place to get started is, we've been talking a lot about EVM, and I know Ontology is making some pretty big shifts there. It's really going to open the door to a lot of new people in a whole new world. So, you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on, what changes are coming to fruition presently?
Yeah. So, real briefly, Ontology is this project that's been building out their ecosystem for almost 4 years since they launched mainnet, and since then, just been delivering consistently, both in terms of its blockchain, but also the technology to support the privacy and security of Web3. And really, what that means is creating tools for decentralized identity and data. So right now, kind of one of the more exciting things happening at Ontology is the fact that we've launched EVM. And, I think for anybody in this space that has been developing and seen how this ecosystem is changing, is that EVM compatibility is becoming crucial to just supporting developers and communities. And so Ontology realized this. We had the conversation last year, and the team has been building out the EVM and making sure that it's something that is seamless but also secure. So once we went through all the audits, we released it, and so that's where we're at today. We're looking forward to onboarding developers like yourselves to come and build on Ontology in a way that is familiar to you.
Cool. Yeah, I know we've been talking to you guys for a while about this. Super excited to help support, partner as you guys transition through this. We've been partners for a long time now, and it's great to see like this kind of continued development. And I think that I think it's kind of interesting because when a new blockchain or blockchain like yourselves kind of open up themselves to EVM, it's going to be very interesting to see how developers react. We've had a few examples in the past, right? Polygon kind of came out and did their whole push towards really, really inexpensive transactions. We had Avalanche do the exact same thing, but then obviously they've started to incur more issues because of the cost of transactions and kind of how that's addressed. I think for me, the thing that I'm most interested in is Ontology is a 2-token economy. So obviously the ONT token used for staking and governance and things like that, and then the ONG token for gas. What do you think that's going to be like? Like, what do you think that's going to do different? Because I'm not too familiar with too many other chains that have made that transition. I think Icon is kind of similar with ICE, but totally different from what you guys have done. So what do you think the impact of that is going to be with EVM? Do you think that's going to drive anything interesting or different?
So, I think to just harken back a little bit further to something you said with some of these blockchains that have released EVM and kind of have very similar strategies when they're launching and trying to engage developers and communities to use them, it's really easy to say we're fast, we're cheap, right? Because, if no one's on your network, it's going to be fast, it's going to be cheap. But technologically, what have you built in that can support that and sustain that statement? And one of the cool things to talk about with Ontology is its consensus mechanism. You, I think, may be more familiar than most in this because of your work in Ontology and staking as well. But it's that algorithm, VBFT, that leverages proof of stake, verifiable random function, and the Byzantine fault tolerance algorithm as well, which allows for consensus to be reached more quickly and more fairly, right? Randomization. So trying to secure the network in that way as well, but also trying to reach that much quicker. So I think Ontology is one of those few blockchains that could actually boast for like sub 1 second finality. So I think that that's very impressive. But going beyond that, that narrative of we're faster, we're cheaper doesn't always work, right? So for me, one of the things, and I think you and I have talked about this as well in the past, is what else differentiates you from everything else? Like there's the Avalanches, the Solanas, the Polygons of the world, and it's the fact that Ontology, excuse me, has built a infrastructure tool set for decentralized identity and data, which in itself opens up new opportunities for dApps. So that is something that I'm really excited to see continue to grow and develop within the Ontology ecosystem as new projects come in, whether they choose to leverage that. And if so, they come up with some creative solutions themselves in terms of how that will work within their own platforms and ecosystems. So in terms of the 2-token model, you're right. It's actually pretty interesting, not very common with ONT and ONG and the way that it works. Certainly makes for some interesting and highly rewarding staking rewards. So for anybody staking, because of the changes between the 2 tokens, can usually drive the rewards a little higher than most. So in terms of the governance, I don't see much changing at the very beginning. What I am interested to see is how more development on Ontology could potentially drive the price of ONG up. And as that starts to change, how will that affect the entire ecosystem as a whole? Because I think things that are going to be really interesting to see start to happen.
Yeah, you're totally right. This like 2-token economy, it has like some really interesting effects, right? Because you're staking with ONT, but it doesn't consume ONT to run a transaction. So what that does is it means, okay, transactions are going to go up, right? Like transactions go up, and we start seeing more bigger, dApps, DeFi, NFTs, all kinds of things taking off, right? And that's going to drive the cost of the gas token itself to go up, right? And so that should have some impact on ONG. But what that does is I'm very interested in what effect that increased value of that gas token has on the staking side. Because if you're staking for ONT, and the ONT is how you earn the ONG, what's that going to do to the value of ONG? And of ONT. And I think that's going to be super interesting to see, because now you've got like the actual consensus layer is being run by a completely separated token that is not influenced, and the cost of those 2 tokens is not directly influenced by the gas cost on the network. So congestion and all these things, I just think it's a really cool model, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for how that can kind of work in the future. And seeing it combined with EVM is just going to be very neat, because it's going with EVM that invites developers, all kinds of new developers, to come in, do something creative and interesting, kind of work from there. So I'm super excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, and to that point, that's why Ontology, launched that EVM fund, right? To try to attract that type of development, to try to attract that type of creativity in terms of how you could potentially use the infrastructure and the technology that Ontology offers, but also invite some of those potential creativity in the way that the unique token economy of Ontology could potentially serve those platforms and communities too.
Yeah, it's kind of neat, right? It's like if you're staking ONT, right, you can earn ONG. And if you're considering your gas costs, right, normally you would buy the gas token. So what happens is the more you would use applications, the fewer gas tokens that you have. But if you're buying the consensus token and you're staking it and you're earning gas, you could potentially just buy enough of the consensus layer token where you don't need to worry about gas, because you're earning it as fast as you're making it, if not more. Yeah, which is pretty cool. It's like kind of like a way to be like, hey, you have 2 options. You can pay as you go, or you come in, you help secure the network, you stake, you do your part in delegated proof of stake, and guess what? You can run your dApps just off of that gas that I earn. Pretty cool, and for developers too, because then they can come in and stake a huge amount or give out node rewards and do whatever they want to expand.
Yeah, because you think about it, like a lot of times when you go and build on a new platform and you go to testnet, you go to a faucet, right? And that faucet is emitting, a token that doesn't necessarily have any use case in mainnet. But at Ontology, you almost have a faucet for minting this gas for you to be able to use the network. And all it takes is for you to be staking the governance token and earning that over time. So certainly it's a very interesting play as well in terms of how developers can be more efficient in developing on Ontology as well.
It's cool. It's very, very cool. Like all it's going to take is a little bit of creativity to combine that with like some kind of like algorithmic stablecoin. And now you've got like a situation where like gas costs can kind of stay more or less like level based on the consensus of the other group. So it's always consistent and it can always be free for some users. It's cool. It's cool to see these kind of like new opportunities pop up when you make like very small changes to how the actual network works and combine it with EVM. I think it's going to be pretty cool. Yeah. So I kind of think that drives us into like a big point. I think it's last year this kind of topic really started taking off, and I know this kind of goes hand in hand with delegated proof of stake. Is DAOs and like kind of where DAOs are going. We're seeing a lot of those popping up. We're seeing some very cool stuff there. What do you think is coming next? In terms of the whole the DAO piece here.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of DAOs. I think I mentioned to you right before this call 2021 to me was a time of exploration to try to figure out what's going on there and some of the unique use cases for using DAO and some of the obvious challenges for DAOs. And I think we've seen a few people really take on some really ambitious goals with DAOs, right? Like let's buy the Constitution and let's do all these things. Let's pool money to be able to like jointly make these monumental moves. But I think there's also like really small scale ways to use DAOs that could potentially serve existing centralized companies or institutions. I mentioned to you that one of the things that personally I'm exploring over at Ontology is how we can decentralize our Harbinger program. So for anybody who's not familiar with it, the Harbinger program is a program built to onboard ambassadors onto the Ontology ecosystem, people who are already contributing to the ecosystem, and then aligning incentives to them, based on their contributions. So really some of the fundamental use cases for DAOs, but without necessarily the DAO structure, right? The token models and the governance models as well. But now that DAOs, I believe, are reaching a point of maturity, both in terms of the thought leadership behind it, but also some of the tooling that supports people to coordinate, collaborate, and remunerate each other and govern the project and the work that they do. I think we at Ontology find that as we're moving forward with EVM and really with this Web3 strategy is to try to explore how we could do the same thing for our community of supporters, where they can really identify the areas that they want to support Ontology in, right? Like they may see something that is missing to us because they're, on the ground floor talking to people, whereas like maybe I'm there like once or twice a week because I'm having to do something else, but they're there 7 days a week, right? Let's make some assumptions here. Now they're able to say, look, honestly, these are the areas that you need to be engaging the community or the developers, and they can set out on creating initiatives to support that and then even fund themselves to develop that. And then themselves also vote whether that was successful or not and continue that initiative or try something different. So yeah, DAOs are really super interesting. What's down the pipeline? I really am excited to see these institutional players to a point similar to what I was making about Ontology, where instead of like decentralizing everything, is decentralizing processes within their organization.
Hmm.
One of the projects that I've seen doing this pretty effectively is Gitcoin, where they actually have, I think, 4 work streams, and they're slowly wanting to decentralize themselves. So they've identified these 4 key areas of their ecosystem, and they've given it up to the community and saying, you lead this. We have a token that we can allocate to your work stream to incentivize you to do this work. And once these things are starting to kind of take a lot, kind of this life of its own, then we can start decentralizing other parts of our business to the point that the institution, right, this central organization is no longer needed, or is just an actor within the DAO.
That's kind of a cool concept. I just hadn't heard of that. That's pretty cool though, and kind of the possible evolution of that, I guess, right? Is you've got all these different EVM chains, you've got these DAOs popping up, and typically they tend to be focused to one chain in particular, and they're doing some cool stuff. But I think it'd be very interesting to see more of like a development focused or like decentralized funding focused type of DAO popping up, and then going to a blockchain, and then instead of coming in and saying, hey, we're a developer, we're going to build this, you come in and say, hey, we're a DAO, we don't build anything, we just help you pick and fund people that should build things. And so you should give us money because we're that community that will do that. And so the most active people from your community can come on in and help fund that. I think it's kind of a cool concept. And that I think that'd be a very cool future to see, where like a DAO could pop up, come to a new network or new blockchain, invite that blockchain to be maybe a more predominant leader at the beginning within that DAO, and just let it slowly hand off to their own community to help fund developers. I think that'd be pretty cool to see. I feel like
I'd like to see that already, actually.
Yeah.
There's this project called Metacartel. They're not a blockchain, but it's a group of like-minded individuals that have come together, I think, at the beginning of 2020. And they have spun out from Metacartel quite a few different initiatives, all with different areas of focus. Like Raid Guild would be like their developer arm. And these developers go out and they're for hire. Whatever you need built, Raid Guild could build for you. They have Venture DAO. Venture DAO is, for all intents and purposes, just a VC fund. So they've pooled funds, and then to your point, then they go out there and say, how can we support you to build this product? And so you start seeing even these decentralized organizations start to decentralize even further based on very specific needs, but still keeping in mind that maybe there's still a relationship between the two and a synergy there, where any upside from either is captured by the rest. And so one of the terms that started popping up late last year and maybe early this year is sub-DAOs, and how you start stacking these DAOs, right? Where there is this like top level DAO, right, that is able to organize people, have some sort of token economy, and that allows for people to build out in different ways. And as these projects, if you will, find their own footing in this space, then they themselves can spin out. But any kind of revenue or any way that they can generate that revenue, even maybe if they tokenize themselves, there is that share back upstream to the top level DAO, so they can facilitate that same thing to other projects in the future.
It's pretty cool. It's cool. It's kind of like self-fulfilling in that regard, right? They're all kind of like there to support each other and continue to grow and continue to succeed. It's pretty cool. I think that's pretty neat. And we've seen I think early on we saw a lot of projects coming out with tokens maybe based more around like an individual application or a game or some specific function or some exchange or something. And we saw a lot of projects going in this we do X direction. And I think that the DAO piece of it is so interesting because it's a much more flexible business model for a company to even start itself within crypto, right? They can come in and say, hey, listen, we're going to start up as a DAO. This is our ethos. These are the goals and the things that we're trying to accomplish. And we're looking for support. And I feel like that's maybe a bit more of an honest approach to how you can build and expand a community around. It's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Cool, man. So yeah, I guess some other things then. I know that we talked a little bit about NFTs too, and I know that kind of ties in pretty well with DAOs. Last year was kind of crazy, obviously. A couple of very cool DAOs are kind of based around NFTs, and we're seeing a lot of real world stuff happening too. It's kind of a nice way for, like, this kind of art / DAO space to interact. Where do you think that goes next?
Man, NFTs are wild. I think, yeah, sure, there's quite a few that are, not great. But I think if you really kind of dive deeply into like what NFTs represent, I think it's a really interesting segment of Web3 that is worth kind of exploring further, right? The intellectual property elements of it, the community building element of it, I think is really interesting. And to your point, yeah, I think a lot of these NFT projects used their NFTs as a way to segment their own community, like be able to like bring them together. They have these NFT gated discords, if you will. In terms of like what I think is the future of NFT, or really like how they can continue to evolve, just coming really from my perspective of like community building, I think that there is just still a lot of opportunity for us to leverage NFTs to onboard many people from various different backgrounds and interests, right? Because the thing that we throw around a lot, I think, is like we're onboarding the next billion users, right, to Web3. But what does that really mean, right, in terms of like onboarding the next billion users? Because at the end of the day, the next billion users won't look like us. They're from different parts of the world. They don't speak our language, right? For the most part, the communities that are being built and the way that this technology is being used, it's primarily a Western type of, use case, I guess, if you will. But I'm really excited for like the people in Africa that choose to leverage NFTs in a way that really speaks to them, and the people in like, countries that aren't necessarily using them today in a way that makes sense to them, because we're not necessarily using the narratives that are familiar to them. So for me, it's like I'm really excited to see that next group of people to learn about NFT and say, well, this is what it means to me, and then choose to define it in a way that makes sense to their group of their community, the people within their own region of the world, and then leveraging that to onboard them into this ecosystem of ownership and incentive alignment, that is positive sum and not necessarily just about extracting value by like sell me your token and hopefully the price go up, right? I think there's a lot more meaning behind it that we've yet to explore.
Yeah, man, I think it's just getting started. I was at a Chainlink event last night, and we were talking a little bit about cross chain stuff and whatever. And one of the guys there was talking to me about how a big issue is like storage, right? Like storage of data, right? And I think that's kind of the thing that I'm really waiting for somebody to crack is, people are producing these NFTs and they're using IPFS or whatever to store it in a decentralized way. But that's not really sustainable, right? At the end of the day, blockchain is not, as a technology, it's not as efficient as one server. Having 12, 24, 32 servers is nowhere near as efficient as having one. The thing that it does extremely well is that it's decentralized and it's distributed in such a way where it can stay. And so when we talk about things like NFTs, for me, I think where that goes, I think a very cool future would be to see people getting away from the fact that, hey, I've got to actually store the file somewhere. And then instead just saying, we're just going to hash the entire file into just a very simple string. and store that right in the transaction itself, and not worry about storing the actual image or video and whatnot. Because then what you can do is start to store huge NFTs, like multi-terabyte, NFTs could exist and be condensed down into a very simple hash. And then to prove that that NFT is authentic, you just have somebody reproduce it and then go, here, we'll hash this. Oh yes, that's correct. That's exactly the one that they own. I just feel like there's so much room for efficiency and creativity with NFTs. And I feel like we're like just barely getting started into what that can do with blockchain and then probably cross-chain too. I think that's something that I find super interesting. And when I look at Ontology and kind of the direction that you guys are going and a lot of the new things that you're building out, yeah, there's some challenges of NFT, of cross-chain NFTs and things like that. But when you start solving problems in ways like you can store the file in the transaction itself, cross-chain NFTs become extremely achievable. And I'm very interested in seeing blockchains take that on.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to like what type of information do we need to have on chain. I think this is definitely some of the things that I've heard being discussed in at least some of the circles that I operate in. It's like not everything needs to be on chain, right? We need to be careful also of what we put on chain because it's immutable, right? This is things that are there permanently or are supposed to be. So to that point, I think it's a matter of like, I think we're still in that moment of self-discovery of like, what are NFTs? I think also the use case has been very limited. A lot of it, to your point, has to do with like images and that are associated to these tokens. So yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of exploration. One of the things that personally I'm very excited about, because this is like a project that was spun out through Ontology that is now kind of continuing to develop in itself, is Orange, right? Which is a project that is building out an ecosystem of decentralized reputation, which allows you to mint that as either a verifiable credential, using the DID standard, or as an NFT, right? And so these NFTs, then non-transferable NFTs, represent a lot more than just a pretty picture. They actually stand for your activity in this space and your positive contributions into this ecosystem, which then can be leveraged. Looking at the composability of blockchain can be leveraged by another project to onboard you more easier, right? More easily, they can onboard you based on that reputation, or they could potentially open up new markets, under collateralized markets, because of the fact that you are a good borrower. All of this is your reputation, right? Or to the point of NFTs, if I am a member of your community, shouldn't I be able to have first pick of the NFTs that you're minting instead of being restricted in some alien way, right? That is not necessarily consistent with the way that the community has been built, that then allows for these scalpers to come in, buy all of these NFTs, push the market price up, and suddenly that community that was there from the very beginning is excluded from it and has a barrier from being able to participate in that sale, in that ownership of that community asset, right? So these are all really interesting ways that we're exploring, as well as how NFTs could potentially be leveraged within the Web3 ecosystem in a way that's composable and portable across multiple blockchains. To your point about being able to take this asset and this information cross-chain.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I think that's super cool. The future of that is pretty interesting to see. It's constantly been a problem that's kind of persisted, right? Is how do you sit down and actually allow somebody to kind of differentiate themselves within such a decentralized space, you know? And I think that for me, it comes down to it's this difference between privacy and anonymity, and to be anonymous means you're obviously anonymous, but to be private is very different. That means that you have the ability to choose to be private or public. And I think that's such an interesting point. It's like when somebody says, that is my wallet there, and they say it publicly on Twitter, that's a choice that can just be made within a private system. It can't be made within an anonymous system. And I think that's cool, and it's cool to see people kind of pushing that future with decentralized ID and et cetera. That's cool.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, to your point, I know you're one of the folks when I first started learning about blockchain, or at least like in the way that like I started developing in this ecosystem, you were always a huge advocate for privacy. In fact, crypto, what is it, the cypherpunks manifesto was one of the things that you shared with almost everyone day one, right? So I think that speaks to that in terms of privacy, right? And so in this world of pseudonymity and anonymity, right? There is something to be said about the choices, the agency you have in this space to remain private, right? When you put in your .eth address to your Twitter account or your PFP to your Twitter account, you are making these choices that remove some of that anonymity, right? In the space. And so when we talk about identity and reputation, we're looking at this by trying to leverage some of these inherent privacy preserving nature of the technology, where we're not asking you to verify yourself as Julian from Unifi Protocol, right? We're simply saying we are taking your Web3 identity, which is your wallet, as your identity. Now, how much PSYOPs did you do to protect your identity from that? That's on you, right? Like you can simply create a new identity, a new wallet that's unattached, unconnected to any of your previous history. And from that, you can generate reputation as well that is, consistent with those values of privacy. But again, it's trying to create these technologies that are preserving privacy in a way that allows this space to move forward, and still respectful of people who have those choices to be pseudonymous and private.
Yeah, that's cool. Super cool, man. Well, this has been a great chat. I really enjoyed taking some time to kind of go over a bunch of neat stuff here. DAO, NFTs, the future of ontology. It sounds like some very exciting things to come. Anything you want to wrap up with or final comments?
Yeah, Ontology's actually been working pretty hard at like redesigning some of our forward-facing content. So like our website. So ont.io got a recent update. We created a new website called ont.id, also that talks about your decentralized identity. So those are probably be two resources that I would encourage anybody that's curious to learn about ontology to go into. Our Telegram obviously continues to be, one of the main ways to connect with our team. Me personally, I'm a big fan of Discord, so I'm on Discord often. If anybody wants to jump in there and talk to me and really want to explore what we're doing with DAOs ourselves, just jump into any of those, and I'd be happy to continue the conversation.
Cool, man. Yeah, I think just to kind of extend that point a bit more, ontology has and continues to be probably one of the best proof of stake rewarding ecosystems out there. Like the APRs have been absolutely unbelievable for a very, very long time. And I think this 2-token economy works well. And I think that frankly, this new EVM push is just going to make that even better for those that participate in such a way. So it's very cool to see that you guys are continuing to encourage that. And I parrot you on Discord. I'm trying to actually become more active there. It's a lot of work and it's challenging, but I'm trying. Just like I'm trying with Twitter. It's not really trying, but sometimes I like something once in a week or so. So you should follow both Humpty and myself on those. Probably him more than me. I'm not on there very much. But with that being said, guys, thank you all so much. And everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much for coming out here to chat, Humpty. And looking forward to see you out there in the digital world. See ya.
Bye-bye.